Hey, how's it going, guys? It's Nate here. And just a couple days ago, quite literally at the final hour of July 4th, at least in my time zone, the channel hit 500,000 subscribers. 500,000. Obviously an enormous thank you, perhaps the size of Skyrim, is overdue. I don't want to say I started going full-time per se, because I was still a student, and later on for a while I was working professionally too, but I started taking this channel really seriously about 2 years ago, and uploading the content you all know me for regularly. I'm doing YouTube full-time now, and have been for a few months, but more on that later. Anyway, over these past 2 years, we have dissected hundreds, possibly even thousands, if you consider all of the series we have on this channel, of Skyrim facts. And I figured that possibly the best way to celebrate such a major milestone like this one would be to go back and take a look at what are, in my opinion, and at least what seems to be the community consensus to an extent, the best of all these Skyrim Easter eggs and hidden facts that we've covered. Some of the information that came off as the most impressive or amazing over these past 2 years. The top 10 tiny details, if you will. I think this is a pretty great video idea, and I've thought about doing something like this for a while, so it seems the stars are finally aligning. For this special edition of 10 Tiny Details, I'm also going to consider any facts that we've covered on this channel regardless of the series. I think that gives us a lot more to work with, because there's definitely some really impressive stuff that we've mentioned in other playlists. Chances are you're going to recognize a few of these if you're a regular over on the channel, and if you've watched every video, then I suppose you'll recognize all of them. However, a lot of what I'm using we haven't touched on in genuine years. So hopefully you'll still find yourself blown away by a couple. Anyway, now that we've gotten this hefty monologue out of the way, let's dive right into the top 10 tiny details you may still have missed in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Starting off, we have the secret hidden blade. So, Fultheim is what at first appears to be your typical drunken elderly tavern dweller, who spends his days ruffling around the isolated Nightgate Inn in the Pale. However, this old Nord seems to be harboring a very big and very important secret. He's likely a former member of the Blades, the ancient order of Imperial bodyguards destroyed by the Thalmor during the Great War, whose remnants are still being hunted by the elves. The reason we suspect this is, for one, well, he has a Blades Akaveri sword strapped to his waist, and one of those is incredibly rare, expensive, and could get anyone who wields one killed. So, that's pretty damning. Furthermore, in his bedroom, Fultheim also has a plethora of books stored related to the Blades, the Thalmor, the Great War, and indeed a wealth of topics related to warfare and understanding Skyrim. So, clearly Fultheim's more than the average drunkard. If asked about his clientele, the Nightgate Inn's innkeeper will remark that he suspects Fultheim stays at the place to drink, quote, a lifetime of bad memories away, possibly implying the man's seen some considerable trauma in his past. The elderly lad doesn't offer much dialogue himself, but frankly his reading material and sword choice say everything I need to hear. Rest assured, Fultheim, your secret's safe with us. Next on our list, the statues of Sovngarde move. This one was definitely among my favorite details to ever cover. Essentially, the playable area we visit in Sovngarde is surrounded by these weird hooded statues that sort of resemble the Greybeards. They're rather easy to ignore as just some additional decoration, but they're no ordinary pieces of stone. As when you let a statue leave your field of view for some time and turn back to face it again, that statue's rotation will likely have changed to be facing the Dragonborn. They're watching you. Such behavior heavily resembles that of the Weeping Angels from the Doctor Who British television series. Though, luckily, Sovngarde statues don't appear that keen on murdering people to death. Just creeping us out. Coming in at number 3, we have a tiny detail that was in fact covered in our first episode ever. This one's really one of the ones that inspired me to make the whole series in the first place. And that is that if the player uses a flame spell on a small stream of water, you'll begin to see bubbles and steam, suggesting that you're boiling it away with the heat. Now, bear in mind this is just a visual effect, and has no real impact on the water levels or flow or anything like that. The trick also only works on those rather small streams of H2O we see within cities and the like, not on fuller bodies of water like lakes or rivers. Nonetheless, a very impressive extra detail by Bethesda. For 4th spot, in Boethiah's Daedric quest, Boethiah's Calling, the Daedric Princess of Plots will send the Dovahkiin to kill her former champion and take his place. The man's a Dunmer, held up at Knife Point Ridge, and apparently betrayed his former lord in some way, though she doesn't care much to elaborate. The mission's a fairly cookie-cutter, go here, clear this dungeon, kill X guy, and report back to complete the quest, after which you'll be named Boethiah's new champion. Nothing about it sticks out as all that memorable. I mean, you don't even get to hear the old champion side of the story. He's hostile and offers no dialogue. Or does he? You see, while the target we're sent to assassinate is very much hostile from the moment he spots us, if we make use of a powerful enough calming spell, or the Voice of the Emperor ability for Imperials, and pacify the character for a period of time, when interacted with, you'll be able to enter dialogue with the elf. And it turns out he does have a lot of dialogue.
That was a long time ago. I told you. I'm done with all that. There's enough blood on these hands. I'm interested in creating things now. A man who feels no fear has no heart. I know fear, but it does not control me. If you desire to fight me, then let's get this over with. Mind my words, or I'll mind them for you. I'm slave to no man, no god, and no Daedra. Boethiah talks about leaving your mark, a sign of your passing. Well, you can make a mark on the world without treachery and murder. Whenever a man's life is saved by armor made with these hands have changed that man's destiny and his family's.
Much of what he's referring to makes no sense given the context of this quest. It appears the old champion is now a blacksmith of some sort, and he even alludes to us having spoken before. So it's quite possible all this dialogue is really just some leftover assets from cut portions of the quest that Bethesda figured no one would notice, as opposed to being an intentional tiny detail. No matter, it's really cool either way once you're able to access it. Halfway through at number 5, the ancient Nord ruin of Yngvild off of Skyrim's northern coast is occupied by an Altmer necromancer named Arundel, and his army of undead Draugr and enslaved spirits that serve his every command. Some journals of his we can find suggest Arundel is an especially evil man, even by necromancer standards, though we have little time to delve too deep into that. After hacking our way through an onslaught of enthralled zombies and ghosts, our eyes can finally meet those of this devious Mur at last. He proudly sits in a custom throne room with a subjugated ghost at his side. As soon as either detect the player, both will turn hostile, and you'll have to put an end to these twisted games once and for all. Or do you? Yes, I'm having a lot of fun with these rhetorical questions. Because also in this throne room, a soul gem can be found sitting atop a small pillar. At first it looks to be no more than some mere treasure for us to loot. But, if you're able to sneak up to this soul gem and steal it, without Arundel or his unwilling ghostly ally noticing you, something remarkable will happen. The Phantom will turn on the Necromancer, and immediately start attacking him. In fact, if the ensuing battle gets too loud, another ghost from another room will help slay the elf. It's as if us stealing the gem somehow removed whatever spell was binding these spirits, and as soon as they were free, they wanted their revenge. Funnily enough, the ghosts will typically win the fight anyway. Sadly, the undead will remain hostile to the player, despite you being their liberator. Oh well, I suppose we may as well put them out of their misery one final time. 6th, soon after starting Skyrim's Civil War questline, regardless of which faction the Dragonborn chooses to back, both sides will send you to recover an item known as the Jagged Crown. The Jagged Crown, as Old Nord legend goes, was a crown worn by some of Skyrim's most ancient and legendary High Kings, but since has been lost to history and condemned to the realms of myth. Both General Tullius and Ulfric Stormcloak are convinced that recovering it will further legitimize their respective claims to the throne. Well, Tullius really just wants to give it to Elisif because technically he's only supporting her you get the idea. This forms the basis of the creatively named quest, the Jagged Crown. After you found it being worn by some spooky Draugr in a ruin, simply return it to the leader of your faction and complete the quest to continue the war. Or maybe don't, as Bethesda, believe it or not, gives us a somewhat secret secondary option of giving the Jagged Crown to the rival side. So, say you got the crown for the Stormcloaks. Rather than give it to Ulfric, if you choose so, while you have it in your inventory, you may instead head over to Solitude and give it away to Tullius instead. Doing this will also essentially allow you to switch sides mid-war and continue the Civil War with whatever claimant you defected to.
You? What? How could you possibly? Oh, so you're trying to play both sides, is that it? What do you really want? You'd do well to get out of here before I change my mind and have you locked in irons. Well, you did show remarkable initiative, and you didn't have to bring the crown to me. But let me warn you, joining the Legion is for life. Any previous loyalties? I trust we understand each other. You can prove your new allegiance to me by delivering an important message to the Jarl of Whiterun.
The game in no way, shape, or form suggests to us that this behavior is an option. It's just something you can discover if you're feeling a bit treacherous. So, what are you waiting for? It's time to embrace your inner Benedict Arnold. Next, speaking of Nord ruins... Wait a minute, we didn't just talk about Nord... Oh well, just pretend we did. They're often peppered with the statues you're seeing on screen now. Large stone busts of a bearded Nord man. Well, these here statues are actually modeled after the default Nord character preset from the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind. The more you know! Coming in at number 8, Skyrim's a land of many books. From scientific reports to choose-your-own-adventure novels, it seems there's reading material capable of suiting just about anybody's tastes in this frozen province. One book in particular, though, is really cool. The Art of War Magic by a Zoran Arctis, to the untrained eye, may initially seem like little more than an oddly structured book on how to properly use the arcane arts in a battle context. Alas, what you may not have known is that the entire text is indeed one giant reference to the ancient work The Art of War by Chinese General Sun Tzu, written literally thousands of years ago. Aside from the obvious naming similarities, the entire way The Art of War Magic is written is styled off of Sun Tzu's work, with each chapter beginning with the words, "Master Arctis said," whereas the Art of War's chapters begin with the line, "Sun Tzu said." There's even some direct lines ripped from The Art of War included in this Skyrim book, like "Victory without battle is the acme of skill." It looks like someone over at Bethesda was studying up on their history. Or preparing to conquer a Chinese kingdom, but I'm gonna go with the former and hope it's not the latter. Getting real close to the end here at number 9, we take a trip into the Rift, finally, to visit Lost Prospect Mine. It's a small abandoned, mine, that we can explore right on the border of the Gerol Mountains. It's a fairly insignificant location, with no enemies, quests attached to it, and not much in the way of looting options. But while we're ruffling through it, we can find the journal of one of the original owners of Lost Prospect, a man named Hadrier. In it, he details how he and his partner Byrne opened up this location a while back, with high hopes of striking gold. Unfortunately, they never found themselves so lucky, only occasionally turning up some small scraps of quicksilver, just enough to barely keep the location open. Sometime a while after the mine's opening, Hadrier ran into the town of Riften nearby. We don't know for how long he was gone, but when he returned, Byrne had just disappeared. The author of the journal quite reasonably seems to feel very betrayed by this, and concludes his diary cursing Byrne and promising to close the location. A rather sad tale, though Hadrier's interpretation of events, as we're about to learn, was very incorrect. He couldn't have been more wrong. There's a small waterfall in the middle of the mine that oversees a small tunnel. If we do some jumping jujitsu, we can make it inside of that tunnel. And should we follow it, the Dovahkiin will be led into a tiny chamber, filled with gold ore veins, and at the center of it all, a skeleton, buried by some rocks. This must have been Byrne. He never abandoned his friend. When Hadrier was gone, he must have just happened to finally strike gold. But it seems mined a bit too enthusiastically. The structural integrity of the area collapsed, and he was buried in the process. Hadrier was probably just feet away from his remains when he penned that final scathing diary entry. Not too much more to add. One of Skyrim's most depressing tales. And finally, last on our list, the book, The Night Mother's Truth, was penned by a certain Gaston Belafont, and it tells the tale of the Dark Brotherhood's dead matriarch, the Night Mother, who's only kind of dead. It's weird. Mr. Belafont's work also goes in depth on discussing the structure and organization that is the Dark Brotherhood, namely how they operate and what principles they seem to abide by. Overall, this book's pretty easy just to forget about as another one of the generic texts in Skyrim. But doing that might be a mistake. You see, within the Dark Brotherhood's Falkreath Sanctuary, there's a small spider pit, where the guild's pet spider, Liz, lives. And inside of that pit, there's also a skeleton, suggesting they've been feeding this creature some people. Approach that skeleton, and you'll find its name is Gaston Belafont, the very author of that book we just discussed. The Brotherhood fed them to their spider, probably while he was still alive. Within Gaston's skeleton's inventory is a hastily scribbled note. In it, he describes himself searching for the Dark Brotherhood Sanctuary's location, and finally finding it. Evidently, he was watching from the outside as members went in and out, and he was gonna try himself to get inside somehow. Though, obviously, that plan didn't work out too well. He must have been caught and made into spider kibble. So kids, the lesson here is clear. Don't try and break into people's homes, I suppose. Anyway, with those final moral words of wisdom, we are going to conclude this video. The top 10 tiny details you may have missed in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Thanks for stopping by, everyone, and again, thanks even more for 500k. It's really a milestone I had never imagined surpassing. And while YouTube growth is supposed to be this really gradual thing, I still can't help but feel amazed. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Cheers to the past 2 years, and cheers to however many are to come. Peace out, everyone.